The chapter begins with the arrogant king on his knees. He holds out the crown towards the vampire, begging him to let him live, and it doesn't matter if the bloodsucker of the earth takes it or something else. But instead, the Fanged Man kills the man with one jerk, and then orders to kill all the people at all. After that, we are shown how vampires who clean people find survivors with children. One of the girls says that she had some kind of dream that liberation would soon come and the era of the fangs would fall. Of course, they don't believe her. That's why they quickly kill all the adults and want to say goodbye to the children. But then someone's voice calls them. It turns out to be a knight in black armor who is heading towards them. Vampires notice that he looks more like a corpse. The man immediately rushes at the villains, not even paying attention to the fact that one of them managed to pierce him through with a sword. 2 vampires were defeated and scattered into the dust. The girl who was talking about the hero immediately runs up to the knight. But when he takes off his helmet, she is horrified with the rest of the children. They really have a living corpse in front of them, whose nose may even fall off. The others immediately scatter when they see him. They show us what happened a few days ago. Some people in masks of plague doctors find the corpse of a man in a standing position. He was a gladiator, achieved 228 victories, and his name was Gunther. They revived him so that he could save humanity from vampires. There is a special device in his brain that will keep him alive even if the body breaks apart. He can also now modify his own body, which means that he can now not only stand on a par with vampires, but also be even stronger. The survivors ask Gunther to fight for them, but he asks for one condition, calling some man to him. He grabs him by the head with his hips, holding him as a hostage, starting to say that his condition is to get rid of any slag, and people are no better than the same bloodsuckers. The girl from the cult does not react to this in any way, but looks at the time, saying that Gunther has about 4 seconds left to live. He, not understanding what is happening, quickly turns off when he is pierced with something. After a while, the corpse manages to wake up again. The man he recently took hostage informs him that energy is needed for his life, which can only be given by the life of a living person. The girl, who had been counting seconds before, disconnects some kind of tube from herself and says that now Gunther needs to be connected to her through this device. But after disconnecting, he will have only 2 hours left. People with similar devices who can give their lives are called power engineers. And among the hundreds of volunteers, the transplantation was successful only for Ariel, a girl who had counted seconds before. If Gunther kills people, he will live for 2 hours at most. But if he starts fighting vampires, he will live much longer. And while the main character is thinking about it, another member of the survivors bursts into the room, intending to talk about something, but does not have time, because a sword pierces his chest, and 2 vampires appear from behind, who certainly do not mind eating human flesh. The captain wants to send his men to the slaughter with 2 reptiles so that he can put Gunther together, but they refuse, because this is pure suicide and no one wants to die. That is why Ariel decides to buy time. She grabs a crossbow and aims at one of the vampires, intending to stab him in the head, but the bloodsucker manages to catch an arrow near his eye. Angry, the vampire rushes to her, dodging numerous arrows. But despite the girl's quick reaction, she still can't dodge the subsequent punch in the stomach. The bloodsucker grabs her by the throat and presses her against the wall, asking his brother if such a beauty will like Benzel Nim before deciding that he will keep her for himself. The second Fanged One is clearly not happy with this, because there is a small skirmish between the comrades, which is very useful to people. By this time, they manage to collect Gunther, who immediately throws one vampire into the wall, starting to lecture Ariel that she could have died and such a rash act should not have been done at all. But the same vampire who was thrown into the wall gets to his feet, despite the fact that he has a hole in his head. The girl explains this by saying that you need to hit the heart, otherwise regeneration will occur. The big guy pushes the brunette aside so that she does not get hurt, and then hits one of the enemies again, while the second, in the heat of his own passion or fear, rushes at Ariel, shouting that she belongs to him. But Gunther still manages to be there in time, hitting the restless bloodsucker. The man clearly enjoys the battle, especially since his body is in many ways superior to a human. That's just that he should be careful with his heart. The gladiator grabs the first vampire, wanting to finish him off, but he decides to interest him in his own proposal. The undead tells about their offer: if Gunther kills them, then Benzel Nim will come here in less than an hour, because they are of the same blood. He also suggests that he will leave in peace if Ariel is given to him. The man offers to give him a commander, to which he is refused, which is why he deprives the vampire of life with one sharp blow to the heart. The second lost his life absolutely the same way. After that, the gladiator wants to find out who Benzel is, to which he receives the answer that he is a high-class vampire. We also learn that there are 3 types of vampires: pure-blooded, who have been undead since birth; high-ranking, who have the purest blood; and low-ranking, who are born from the blood of the second. Since one of the highest fangs can come to them, Gunther agrees to cooperate and asks to recharge it. The commander and Ariel decide to give him a small gift first, an armor made of refined mithril, and there are special marks on the wrists of the suit that will indicate how much time he has left. But then something starts rumbling from above. Something very huge has fallen. Our hero has to go to the surface in order to deal with what is happening outside. Except it's not Benzel who appears from behind the door, but 3 little bald vampires. They talk to the knight about the fact that he killed their family members. They also turn out to be a collector of persons who are not even going to attack yet. On the contrary, they apologize for their relatives. And only the commander was delighted with such communication, as the Fangs report that they promise some kind of Julius to kill all people in the world. Gunther threatens them, saying that they are somehow too few to cope with him. One of the vampires laughs loudly before a strange monster begins to come out into the light. It turns out that there are not 3 of them, but many times more, and if there were no sunlight, no one would be able to defeat them. The heads seem to be connected by blood, which means that somewhere between them there must be a body with a heart. The collector gets up behind the girl and decides to attack, throwing his body with his heads up in order to hit down with a sharp movement. But the corpse manages to save her in time and asks to move away. At the same time, the vampires move to another man in a plague mask, intending to devour him altogether. Fortunately, Gunther reacts just as quickly, demolishing a couple of heads. He decides that if he doesn't know where the body is, he'll just get rid of them all. The undead are already beginning to guess that the man in front of them is not a man at all, because his boundless power cannot be compared with any human warrior. Continuing to bash the heads, the gladiator does not have time to understand at what moment one of the jaws opens and grabs his wrist into his mouth. And when he tries to drop the load, the second hand also finds itself in the grip of sharp teeth. The heads are gnawed not only by the upper, but also by the lower limbs, and the vampire himself soon decides to show what it feels like to be inside him. It starts with a little background. Our hero, as a child, was in a landfill where no human foot had ever set foot. No one heard his screams, and after a couple of days he fell silent. There was only one way to survive in this cruel world. Once inside the vampire, Gunther begins to talk about how he can get out. The force of someone else's bite is strong. All the limbs were captured, and it was too dangerous to jump down. We need another way out. Then he hears a scream, and looking there, he notices that these are no longer vampire heads, but human ones, who are shouting for the vampire to surrender. Now he was presented with a real collector's disguise, a black vile creature with one eye, which boasts of the most beautiful heads of heroes who challenged him, but in the end, could not do anything. The gladiator convinces him to take off his helmet, so that she herself could not understand that he is completely unattractive. Of course, the vampire's face does not frighten, but this gives the man an advantage. He opens his mouth and begins to bite the heads himself, tearing them from his limbs. After that, we are shown how people hide, watching the half-asleep state of the cocoon with heads. The commander swears at everyone, saying that it was too dangerous to come here, and in general, the knight let them down. But when the vampire's hoon begins to fall apart, he immediately changes his mind. Gunther bursts out of the insides, only without the hind limbs. He barely grabs Ariel and says that they should change their strategy and run away before the sun rises. The vampire notices the girl. That's why he immediately wants to get her face in his collection. There are about 5 minutes left before sunrise. Since there is no one near the door, it would be possible to hide and wait, but then a cry and help interrupts the plan. The heads caught the captain and other members. Gunther just says that this is a forced measure and they can't help them in any way with the girl, but she is too persistent. That's why she jumps into free space, waving her arms and attracting the attention of Benzel. The monster immediately rushes at her. However, once again she is lucky that the gladiator manages to catch her. Since all the attention was on them, they leapt towards the exit, while the collector kept moving after them like an angry beast. In the end, he even sweats to cling to the man's hand, but he pulls off the limb and in an instant finds himself on the street. The sun was already visible on the horizon, but as soon as Gunther turns around to look at his companion, Benzel pushes him, taking the girl for himself. All is lost. We see a half-dead collector holed up in his cave. The lower vampires are worried about him and want to deal with the unknown knight themselves, but the undead literally orders them to bring him more faces. The minions find 34 people who will certainly please their master, and then we see that he still managed to take Ariel with him. He promises her that once he consumes her, they will be together until the end of the ages. After that, we are shown the consequences of a vampire attack. Gunther asks the commander to hurry up in his assembly, while he is angry and asks if there is no other way to revive him without Ariel. The man tells him about the device again and says that if the corpse decomposes to a certain point, there will be no way back. He will have only 3 days, and if they do not have time to notice the stop of the regeneration device in time, then you cannot even dream of rebirth. Moreover, the development of a new energy source is impossible, so it is necessary to save the girl. When everything was connected, the commander offers him to test a new ranged weapon, since it is impossible to defeat the collector near. Then we are shown exactly how Benzel gets new faces. He grabs someone with his clumped palms and wraps them in flesh, saying that blood is his weapon. After getting someone else's dog and killing a person, the vampire looks at Ariel. Time for them to have fun. The undead are talking to a girl. She does not seem scared, but even decides to talk about the fact that Benzel's soul at some point in time was absolutely indifferent to everyone, to which he refuses. The vampire begins to reach for the brunette's face, but then a man with a furious desire to kill rushes at him. Fortunately, the collector reacts quickly enough and presses the hero to the wall. He only scoffs at threats in his direction from a pathetic person. The monster shows his ugly hand and tells how he himself saved several people from a burning house. That's just praise, and praise could not be obtained, since everyone only despised him for his face. The black stripes that previously covered the head are gently removed to the side and allow you to look at the vampire. The face looks like a skull, plastered with lumps of skin. Benzel is so dampened by resentment that absolutely everyone he trusted or saved turned away from him. No one cared at all, and many even hated him. Sacrificing yourself for someone is the stupidest thing you can do. The man continues to resist, saying that now you need to look not at the past, but at the present, and such monsters are not capable of this at all. The collector giggles at him, about to say what the vampires want and at the same time tear off someone else's face. But as soon as his hand reaches out towards the hero, something like an arrow immediately pierces the limb. Gunther is ready for the start of the second round of their battle. The launcher consists of powerful muscles that protect the bone spike created from the tibia of a bison. The muscles responsible for pushing and pulling slowly stretch and accumulate strength, and then attack, releasing bone spikes at great speed. Actually, the weapon is very destructive, but there is a minus: if you spend all 6 spikes, it will become absolutely useless. The main task is to deal with Benzel, because then the lower vampires who were created from him will also die. When they are already inside the cave, there are about 15 minutes left before the corpse is turned off. The vampire is sure that the barrier of faces will save him, so he hides inside again. But what is his surprise when a thorn from a bone flies almost in front of his eyes, demolishing all heads, so he orders his henchmen to stand up for him. The gladiator quickly deals with small fry, but at some point one of the lower ones grabs him by the leg, thereby holding him, which makes Benzel have the opportunity to attack the knight, which he does. One of the faces bites into the corpse's head, and the world fades before his eyes.